Imagine a town where no one truly dies, where smiles are too perfect, greetings are always cold, and conversations feel rehearsed. Pine Hollow was that kind of place, a slice of perfection isolated from the world, and Mark Harlow was about to uncover a terrifying secret hidden beneath that perfection, one that would forever change what it means to be human. Mark parked his car at the entrance of Pine Hollow, feeling Vermont's chilly air touch his face. After the death of his wife Amanda, he needed a fresh start. Pine Hollow promised tranquility with its clean streets, orderly houses, and ever-smiling residents. He rented a cabin near the forest and began working at a local grocery store, getting to know the town's people. They were friendly, but something felt off. They all seemed the same expressions, the same gestures. One night, Mark witnessed something unusual, a violent car accident. He rushed to help, but the next morning the driver was alive and unscathed, acting as though nothing had happened. How could anyone survive that? And why did everyone seem to pretend it never occurred? Mark began to realize Pine Hollow was more than a peaceful town. It was a place where the rules of life and death didn't seem to apply. Mark couldn't get the accident out of his mind. The driver, Henry Calloway, seemed perfectly fine, greeting customers at the grocery store with a hollow smile. Something was wrong, but no one else seemed to notice. He started observing the townspeople more closely. Movements that were too precise, phrases repeated in different conversations, and an unsettling silence whenever he tried to ask about the accident. One night, while walking through the forest, Mark stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. Inside, he found machine parts and diagrams resembling human bodies. In the corner, an old photo of the town featured Henry. He hadn't aged a day. That night, on his way home, Mark felt watched. He knew there was something sinister about Pine Hollow, something lurking beneath the surface. And now, it seemed he had attracted unwanted attention. In the following days, Mark's paranoia grew. He noticed Henry watching him from the corner, and even townspeople he had never spoken to greeted him with an eerily familiar tone. Mark went to the town library where he found old records. Something caught his eye. Photos and articles about residents who had supposedly died in accidents or from illnesses, but were still alive and well in the town. Among the documents, he found something devastating. His late wife Amanda's name listed as a collaborator for a company called Neurodyne Systems. That's when Mark understood. His arrival here was no coincidence. Amanda was connected to this somehow. But how? And why did the townspeople act as though he was part of something much bigger? The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but Mark knew the truth would be far more disturbing than he could imagine. Mark decided to confront the town's mayor, Margaret Eldridge, a commanding woman who seemed to know more than she let on. In a tense meeting at her office, the truth began to surface. Margaret revealed that Pine Hollow was an experiment conducted by Neurodyne Systems, an advanced technology company. Residents who suffered fatal accidents or illnesses were replaced by humanoid robots, programmed to perfectly replicate their lives. Here, no one truly dies, she said with a cold smile. When Mark asked about Amanda, Margaret hinted at something even more terrifying. Amanda had worked on the project and orchestrated his arrival there. A chill ran down Mark's spine. If Amanda knew about Pine Hollow, what else had she hidden? And why was he brought here? Mark was about to discover that the nightmare was far from over. Determined to end it all, Mark returned to the cabin in the forest, where he had found machine parts and diagrams. He knew this place was a crucial part of the system controlling the automatons. Inside, he found a central server covered in cables and blinking lights. Before he could destroy anything, he heard footsteps behind him. Henry Calloway, along with other townspeople, blocked the exit. "You don't understand, Mark," Henry said, his voice now cold and mechanical. "We're protecting you." Mark fought to escape but was overpowered. Before losing consciousness, he saw a screen flashing his own name. Mark would wake up to a different world, a world where he himself might not be who he thought he was. The fight against the automatons wouldn't end. But now he was part of something bigger, something terrifying. Mark woke up in the grocery store where he worked, as if nothing had happened. The shelves were neatly arranged, the customers smiling, and the morning went on as usual. But something was different. His movements felt calculated, his hands steadier than before. Looking at his reflection in the store window, he noticed something about his face that didn't seem natural. It was subtle, but disturbing. The townspeople greeted him as always, but now there was a strange sense of unity. Mark realized the truth. He had become one of them. When a new resident arrived in town, Mark smiled mechanically. Welcome to Pine Hollow. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about dark secrets like those of Pine Hollow, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And remember, sometimes what seems too perfect can be the greatest threat. Imagine returning to the town where you grew up, hoping to revisit warm memories only to find something wrong. Not a simple mistake, but something deeply unsettling, as if the place you once lived was slowly being replaced by something false, something hollow. This was exactly how Jessica Martin felt when she returned to Willow Creek. But what she discovered, while trying to save her father, wasn't just strange. It was terrifying. Jessica Martin parked her car in the driveway of her father's house, gazing at the mountains surrounding the village. The landscape hadn't changed, tall trees, quiet streets, but something felt different. As she stepped out of the car, Mr. Green, the longtime neighbor, approached with a smile so wide it almost seemed forced. "Jessica, so good to see you back," he said in a voice that was too kind, as though he had rehearsed every word. Jessica replied politely, but as he spoke, something gnawed at her. The cadence of his sentences, the flawless gestures. This wasn't the Mr. Green she remembered. That night, while organizing her childhood bedroom, Jessica found an old wooden box in the closet. Inside, she discovered her mother's diary, covered in a fine layer of dust. The yellowed pages spoke of peaceful days in Willow Creek, but the final entries were different. Her mother had written about how the townspeople had begun to act strangely. Too kind, too perfect. "They are no longer themselves," one entry read. "Something is changing. They're replacing us." A chill ran down Jessica's spine. Her mother had died shortly after writing those words. In the days that followed, Jessica started paying closer attention to the townspeople. Helen, a childhood friend, seemed particularly unsettling. Helen had once been known for being lazy and a bit messy, but now, she was impeccable. Always smiling, always busy, as if she never tired. During a brief conversation, Jessica noticed something even stranger. Helen didn't blink. Not once. "You seem different, Helen," Jessica ventured. "We've all changed for the better," Helen replied, her smile never reaching her eyes. Later, Jessica saw Helen at the market. She was scratching at the skin on her arm, and beneath a tear something glinted, metallic threads. Jessica couldn't ignore what she had seen on Helen's arm. Determined to understand what was happening, she remembered her mother's diary and went to the abandoned barn on the outskirts of town, the place her mother had cryptically mentioned in one of the entries. The barn appeared deserted, but inside, Jessica found a hidden door in the floor. She carefully descended a staircase that led to a corridor illuminated by fluorescent lights. There, she discovered what looked like a laboratory, workbenches filled with mechanical parts, monitors displaying human diagrams, and files bearing the names of townspeople. On one of the screens, a video showed Helen being transformed. Her human limbs were removed and replaced with metallic parts. On the table nearby, Jessica found a list titled, "Next to be replaced." Her heart stopped when she saw her father's name at the top. Jessica ran back to her father's house. The cold night wind seemed to cut through her skin as she drove, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the engine. When she arrived, she found the front door open and lights flickering inside the house. Upstairs, she heard voices and robotic footsteps. Harold was being taken. Without thinking, Jessica followed the men, or what seemed to be men, to the laboratory. There, she saw her father trapped in a machine, wires connected to his head. "Dad!" she screamed, but he only looked at her confused, as if he no longer recognized her. Jessica managed to shut down the machine just in time to save Harold, but something was wrong. He stood up slowly, his eyes dull, his movements stiff. On the way back, as she drove out of the village, Jessica heard Harold humming an old tune her mother used to love, but his voice, it was robotic. In the rearview mirror, a drone from New Dawn Industries was following the car. She knew this was far from over. And you? Have you ever stopped to think about what we're willing to sacrifice for perfection? How far can technology take us before it crosses the line of the unacceptable? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark stories like this one. Imagine living in a place where everything seems perfect. The houses are immaculate, the neighbors are always kind, and every day begins as if it were a dream designed to be unforgettable. But what if that perfection hides something deeply wrong? Michael didn't know this when he arrived in Fairhaven. For him, it was a fresh start. For his wife, Olivia, it was a chance to build the ideal life. Yet deep down, Michael felt something didn't add up, and what he would soon discover would turn their new home into a nightmare from which no one could escape. Now get ready to hear Michael's story. But be warned, sometimes the pursuit of perfection can be the last decision you ever make. Michael and Olivia Carter arrived in the Fairhaven neighborhood on a sunny afternoon. Everything looked like it was straight out of a TV commercial. Clean streets, perfectly manicured lawns, and neighbors smiling as if they had been eagerly waiting for them. On their first night, while Olivia unpacked boxes, Michael noticed something peculiar. A welcome basket had been left at their door, filled with treats wrapped in shiny plastic. A note accompanied the basket, written in meticulous handwriting. "Welcome to Fairhaven. Here, perfection is a priority." Michael frowned. Perfection? He shook his head and went inside. Maybe it was just a friendly slogan, he thought. Even so, an uneasy feeling lingered as he turned off the lights that night. Something woke him in the middle of the night. A faint, metallic noise came from outside the window. He approached, but saw nothing. The next morning, Michael woke up feeling restless. The neighborhood was silent except for the steady hum of lawnmowers, all starting precisely at 7 a.m. He looked out the window and saw the neighbors moving in perfect sync, as if following some invisible schedule. While he had his coffee, Olivia was cheerful. "These people are amazing, Michael. Mr. and Mrs. Green came by to invite us to a barbecue next weekend. They're so perfect." She smiled, but Michael couldn't return it. There was something unsettling about this perfection. That evening, during a walk, he ran into Rick Stanton, the neighbor from the house next door. "Did they seem too perfect to you too?" Rick asked in a low voice. Before Michael could reply, a mechanical sound came from a nearby house. A strange light flickered in the window and Rick quickly walked away. "Don't talk about it. Just don't." Michael returned home, but that metallic noise seemed to follow him, echoing in his mind. Hours later, as he tried to sleep, a new sound came from outside. He got up and looked out the window. A shadow moved, but it didn't look human. Michael's sleep was disrupted by an eerie sound like mechanical footsteps. He peeked out the window again, but he could only make out a figure disappearing around the corner. The next day, Rick Stanton didn't appear in his yard as usual. Worried, Michael decided to go to Rick's house. When he knocked on the door, no one answered. He looked around, making sure no one was watching, and turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. Inside, everything seemed normal until he found a room at the back, locked with a heavy padlock. He forced the lock with a screwdriver he found on the counter. What he saw left him in shock. A wall covered with photos of various Fairhaven residents, with notes like initial phase, reprogramming, and completion. In one corner, there was a file with his own name on it and a logo, Haven Corp. Michael heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Quickly turning around, he saw the silhouette of someone standing in the doorway. It was Rick. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Michael froze as he saw Rick standing in the doorway. Something was different. His movements were slow and precise, and the smile on his face seemed wrong. "You shouldn't be here, Michael," Rick said, his voice monotone and empty. Before Michael could react, Rick took a step forward, but Michael bolted out of the house, his heart racing. He knew something terrible was happening in Fairhaven. Back at home, Michael tried to tell Olivia everything. "They're watching us. The people who disappear, they don't come back the same." But Olivia just laughed. "Michael, you need to relax. You're imagining things. Fairhaven is perfect." In the days that followed, Olivia began acting strangely. She repeated phrases like, "We're safe here," and spent hours talking to the neighbors, smiling in a way that was deeply unsettling. Michael found a recording on his phone made by Olivia. She said, "Michael, something's wrong with me. I feel like they're messing with my head. We need to get out of here." That night, Michael made a decision. To break into the neighborhood's central building, where he suspected everything was being controlled. But he didn't yet know that the truth would be far worse than he imagined. Michael waited until the middle of the night to break into Fairhaven's central building. With a flashlight in hand, he crept inside, finding a dark hall filled with screens. On each screen, the faces of the residents were being monitored in real time. At the center of the room, a massive server displayed the Haven Corp logo. As he approached, Michael found detailed files outlining the replacement process. Residents who disappeared were replaced by identical humanoid robots, programmed to obey. Before he could destroy the system, a familiar voice stopped him. "Michael, you shouldn't be here." He turned and saw Olivia, but her eyes were lifeless. Suddenly, the neighbors began to enter, surrounding him. Michael tried to run, but a searing pain invaded his mind. He collapsed, and everything went dark. When he woke up, he was in his living room, smiling mechanically as he mowed the lawn. He was now one of the perfect neighbors. Sometimes perfection hides dark secrets. And you? How far would you go to achieve the perfect life? Leave your comment below and share this story. Subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales like this one. See you in the next episode, and if you haven't become one of them.